All right, let's talk about bounce short. Bounce short is also one of the most frequent pattern happens throughout the year. The winning percentage is higher than gap up short. It's up to 85%, sometimes can be up to 90% if you see a good one. The frequency happens anywhere between 50 times to 70 times. And that's on the normal year. In a 2022, it haven't happened that often, probably maybe 20. And really doesn't fit the perfect criteria. But on a normal basis, between 2015 to 2021, it happens anywhere between 50 to 70 times per year. Let's talk about the criteria. So first of all, criteria is the minimum spiking percentage has to be 50%. Ideally 70%, but 50% is the lowest you can get. And have students ask me that, what if the spiking percentage is 49.9%? I guess that's not bound short. That's not fit the criteria. The reason why we put a criteria is we have to put a fixed number. Do not try to do a bound short around 47%, 48%. You want to stay disciplined as possible. Those 47%, those 49% doesn't give you enough reward. You want to look up to 100%, 20% bound short. That's much better. The pre-market spiking percentage needs to be 50%. So same thing. The pre-market, if it spikes up in the pre-market, then you will have higher winning percentage. But if it spikes 50% after market open, you will have a little bit lower winning percentage. So there's two different details on that. Make sure memorize that. And also at the pre-market volume needs to be 200K, and that's the minimum liquidity you need before you set into any type of pattern. The individual resistance dollar block, you are going to use the average consolidations for the individual resistance. Check out where's the most consolidated price. Use that price times the volume, which how much the individual resistance volume traded, and you will calculate what's the total dollar block for that individual resistance. Minimum, you want 100 million. And as I talked about in the later slides, the higher the resistance, the better. And for some of the lower micro flow resistance, there's flow rotation involved, which I will be covering later on. Now, this pattern can fit all kinds of market cap zones. So I'm going to give you the maximum for the market cap is between 0 to 500 million. The flow can be 0 to 50 million. And the bigger, when the market cap gets over 200 million, the bigger the market cap, the more resistance is required. Let's say the float is 20 million and the market cap is 500 million. Then you only have a 20 million resistance on a 500 million market cap. That's not going to work. When you're looking at 500 million market cap, you need at least 1 billion individual resistance dollar block. If you don't have a bigger resistance with a bigger cap, then it's not going to work. And also there's going to be a resistance timeline. That's the best case scenario. The resistance has to be within 6 months. If it passes 6 months, you're looking at within 1 year. If the resistance is exceeding over 500 million in terms of dollar block, you can use it. If it passes 12 months, which is going to be 1 year, then the resistance is not going to be active at all. So keep that in mind. I see people using 5 years old resistance, 2 years old resistance. Those will likely to really trick you, and when you short against the resistance, that's where you're likely to get squeezed. Two mistakes that people typically commonly make. First one is shorting resistance over than 1 year and shorting resistance using prior resistance before the split. So after started a reverse split, they're still using the resistance 2-3 months ago. So those are the two biggest mistakes that people make on bound short, and they always tend to get squeezed. Let's talk about the bound short winning percentage factors. So when the market cap and the float are too big, if the market cap is over 1 billion, the float is over 100 million, that is likely to drop the bound short winning percentage significantly. Perfect float and market cap zone will be 0 to 200 million and 0 to 20 million on the float. The market cap exceeding over 1 billion, don't even worry about it. And a second point is when the pre-market gaining percentage is really low, that also has effect on the down short reward. typically a bound short can fade up to 75% from the top. If the pre-market gaining percentage is only 50% to 70%, their max reward can only be around 50% from the top. So there's a little bit of reward difference as well. And also, if the pre-market is up 100% and versus the pre-market is up 51%, 100% pre-market gainer definitely has more winning percentage compared to the 51% gainer. Because if you don't gap up that far, that means you are way too close to the neutralized area. And that's where the stock is like to get tricky. And when the shorts get crowded, and the stock will not drop at all. So the number 3 point is, so if the stock tends to gap up in the pre-market and the pre-market resistance is the same level as the resistance for the individual resistance and same as the consolidation price as well, then in that specific scenario, the bound short winning percentage is going to increase up to 10 to 15%. And the number 4 is there's another criteria. If bound short the spiking speed and the spiking time. If they spike really fast in the pre-market, I mean spiking close to between 920 to 930 mark in this 10 minutes, the stock went up 70%, up 100%, and spiked really fast. That typically will increase the bound short winning percentage as well. As I said, that the faster the spike is or the faster the breakdown is, typically makes people more emotional. They were likely to chase, they were likely to make mistakes. That's where you can take advantage of that. So actually it's faster spikes that are closer to 930 mark, and the speed of that spike is really fast, then you're looking at much better bound short than the normal ones. Let's talk about the average return for bound short. The average risk for bound short should be 7 to 15% from the most consolidated price from the individual resistance in the history. And resistance criteria already give you that within 6 months, the best. So for the bound short, as you can see that I talked about, bound short has 85% winning percentage compared to 70% in the gap up short. So when a pattern has more winning percentage compared to other patterns, that means you can put this pattern into a higher, typically I put them into a higher category so they can afford more risk. And typically I will size it much more compared to gap up short for bound short. Then, so the return for bound short really depends. It's in average, it's between 15% to 25%. Now for 15%, that's where the bound short only spikes up to 50% to 70%. If they're over 70%, up to 100 to 150, then you're looking at 25%, sometimes even up to 50%, depends on the flow, market cap zones, and the resistance. And number 4 is a lot of people were asking me that, hey, Stephen, for bound short, if I'm seeing resistance at $5 for the historical resistance within, let's say, within 6 months, and in the pre-market, the stock went to $5 already. Can I short in the pre-market because I don't want to feel FOMO if it drops in the pre-market, and that would be a wasted bound short. For this specific scenario, I want to emphasize that do not short in the pre-market against the resistance, because typically the market makers can pop up the volume and really push up above the resistance. And sometimes resistance can only be active after the market open. So when the stock is trading really low volume and spiking against the resistance and consolidating, I do not recommend shorting that. Now, if the resistance is really heavy, I'm talking about over 500 million in terms of dollar block. So it has to be 50 million traded around $10. Then you can start partial in the pre-market. Then wait until market open and size in the rest so you can get a little bit better average. So for these specific scenarios, do not short in the pre-market unless you see 500 million in terms of dollar block. And also, do not short in full in the pre-market, only short maybe 1/4, 1/3, then add the rest after market open. That's much safer. And also, because when in the pre-market, when it trades low liquidity and it doesn't really matter, it has resistance, the stock can still pop over the resistance. That's where if you size in full, you'll get stuck because of low liquidity. And if you cover, you'll take a loss and then you feel FOMO once the stock opens and drops under the resistance. Now for super heavy resistance, I didn't put a range in here, but it can be up to 500 million to 1 billion in terms of dollar block. Number 6 is whenever you want to sizing a lot more, you also want to look at the volume pre-market. Then you want to use the volume times the pre-market volume times 10 to get the total volume estimate. Then sometimes the bound short liquidity is a little bit low, so you do not want to exceed 1% of the pre-market volume, and also you do not exceed 1% of the float as well. So that's very important. Number 7, for bound short, you can write it as long as the volume ratio stays under 2 to 1, and you don't have, and sometimes you can cover in partial, but if the ratio is above 2 to 1, it's 5 to 1, 10 to 1, then you're looking, you're already safe because today's volume is unlikely to break the resistance volume. It's far away from breaking the resistance volume. Then you can write it all the way down until the market close, and then you can cover right before the market close. So for that, if you really want to stay confident and stay, to get the max reward, always pay attention to the volume ratio compared to the resistance. So you're using resistance. If it's 10 million, then today's volume estimate should be 5 million. So it should be pretty simple.